What's up guys, it's Project, and we just had 3 epic days of Monster Hunter World Beta on the PS4. Hopefully you were able to enjoy it in that short time frame, but if not, well, here's my impressions on my playtime with the beta, which is probably around 25 hours or so if I include the streams I did, plus some off-stream stuff. This video is mostly just my opinion from my experience and relates to people that have played Monster Hunter in some way, but hopefully my complaints and praises can inform those not fortunate enough to play the beta due to system restriction or work schedule. This is not an introduction to World or the franchise explaining every detail, that's for another video. So first things first, this game lived up to and surpassed my expectations and is the game I've always dreamed of for this series. Seriously, I've been asking for a console Monster Hunter for years, and they couldn't have delivered a better product than this, considering it's the first Monster Hunter on the new gen consoles, especially in the West. The graphics are amazing, the environment is gorgeous, the gameplay is fun and addictive, but most importantly, the controls are finally not a pain to play. If you're unfamiliar with the series, it's been mostly tied to the 3DS as of recent, and has been mainly a handheld franchise after Monster Hunter 2. But I gotta say, coming back to PlayStation and being able to use a lighter, smaller controller with a much better camera stick compared to the 3DS makes this game much more funner and less aching for long sessions. Also, seeing the game with its improved graphics on a big screen is definitely a visual and immersive treat. So let's talk about the beta. It included 3 quests of varying difficulties in 2 stupidly large and dense complex maps. The quests were Hunt quests, Great Jagras being for noobs, Baroth for people that have some action game experience, and Anjanath for people familiar with the games. Of course, you would beat all 3 if you had fun. Beating each of these missions rewarded players bonus packs for the actual retail version of the game, so you get extra items and some monster materials to aid in forging gear faster. In total, there was actually 6 monsters you can hunt, however, 3 extras that you can kill if you wanted to. Supposedly, Puke could show up too, a new monster for the series the game will have, but it's either a super rare trigger to get it to spawn, or some glitch as I never found it, so not going to count him in. All 14 weapon classes were available for the player to use. These are all weapon types that will be in the final game, and you also had a variety of armor sets to mix and match from, which was nice to have. Character-wise, you had 6 preset options, my favorite being the Asian cutie, and same with your Palico, your Neko buddy that hunts with you when your party isn't full, or if you fight solo and will be a part of your experience in the campaign in the actual retail release. Which, speaking of, you had 2 choices of modes to choose from, single player or multiplayer. Now, Monster Hunter is a juggernaut, mostly in Japan, because of its co-op function, as you will most likely have more fun hunting with other people and communicating and planning attacks or traps against monsters. However, the single player is still enjoyable if you wanted to go solo, and I'd reckon a lot more enjoyable than a 3DS game since you can play on a bigger screen and use a lighter controller, and the fact that the game looks so goddamn good compared to the handheld games, even the newest Monster Hunter Double Cross Japanese Switch port. The beta's purpose was for stressing the connectivity, and at least for me, I had 0 issues connecting to the beta and playing with other people, most of you guys who joined the streams I did. However, that was mostly because I created parties myself rather than joined them. Upon trying to join with randoms, I did get the error that everyone keeps seeing. They also included a training room option, which is new to the series, that allowed you to learn and test weapons. This is an amazing and welcome feature for all players, as new players can learn the weapons better without going through mission load screens and such, but players who played the game before can also brush up on their skills or try to learn what the best damage dealing combos are. This is definitely a welcome feature, and I urge new players to the series to use this if you plan on getting the game. That'll help, trust me. I'll be making weapon guides to help new players as well in learning just what are the best combos to do, so you can have an easier and faster time learning rather than trying to understand every single attack. So look forward to those videos when the game releases. But that was basically it for the beta's content. It gave people a bite-sized taste of the gameplay, but that's about it. And that's where I think they could have tried harder to show more of the game's other features, which they failed to do. A quite sizable portion of the fun in Monster Hunter is getting parts of your defeated foes and using them to forge cool new gear. You were able to carve monsters in the beta after defeating them, but it was meaningless. I think the beta would have been better both in replayability but also in general if they started everyone with basic gear, then allow the players to kill monsters, get their parts, and be able to forge some limited weapons to handle the other monsters better and rinse and repeat. With preset weapons from the start, it was already clear how much easier all of the quests were for a lot of players. They got no sense of progression. They had no satisfaction of seeing the fruits of their hard work after a war with a big tough monster matter. Instead, they copy-pasted their usual demos they had from the handheld games, and I think that was a missed opportunity. At the very least, they should have had 2 different weapons in each class, one set that was unlocked after you beat the last mission, which gave slightly more powerful weapons to use and balanced around that. That way at least some people get some sense of progression and reward. They also had no story elements take place in the beta, which, again, is a missed opportunity for basically a new IP for majority of the people potentially or are going to buy this game in the West. If so much is riding on this game's success for Capcom, they probably should have checked every box to make sure people understand this franchise and game are amazing and worth buying. So that's my complaint of the beta as far as content goes. From a buying point, if I were to put myself in a new player's shoes, I might say,
"Is this all there is to the game?"
Which is not something the devs should want to hear. They might have a separate demo for that kind of stuff in the future, but if this is all they got before launch, then those concerns remain true. Now for the usual hunters like me, the gameplay was the main thing that all of us were wondering about, and I think they knocked it out of the park. All the weapons feel fluid, the combos are sick, and the sound effects grow on me more and more. Really kind of like the lighter, more punchy sounds, which I didn't expect to just seeing the footage from trailers and such. The new monsters that seem kind of plain are actually cooler than I expected, and the way they interact with each other and the environment is fantastic. Speaking of the environment, holy hell is there so much detail and wildlife and beauty to both maps demoed. From open spaces to cramped places to verticality, largely very designed areas, and the beautiful skybox, I'm probably most impressed by the environment they've put together for this game. It's just so rich that it actually feels like a real place, and this is where the graphics come into place to make such a thing possible. I've joked on stream saying they should make a VR game where you can just explore these maps in VR and observe the wildlife and even monsters throughout, but I really mean it. It's that breathtaking, both areas. I'm truly impressed by what they've done with it, and there's still more maps in the retail game to explore. I'm super excited to see those. But of course, with such complex ecosystems comes confusion. The maps are confusing due to their size, complex in navigation, the map is a mess with too much stuff on it, and finding the monster was a pain for the first few hunts. You could pick up tracks and clues the monster left behind and gather them to build up your scout flies, helpers that would track the monster once you get enough clues, but these clues were hard to spot in the forest map because of the bright lime green highlight that was barely visible in the daytime. The scout flies also glowed towards everything, so what you thought was going to be a clue was actually just a bug or a herb. Even if you got the scout flies to start tracking a monster, following them can be confusing since they lead you to weird paths. This is especially true for the tree area in Ancient Forest map, since they go up or down a path, but if you didn't happen to see them, it would look like they disappeared. Also, just traversing takes so damn long. If you got knocked down from a higher up point, you'll end up 50 feet below and have to climb all the way back up using the various ledges and junk. So that's my complaint on the maps. I do prefer the openness compared to the zones of past games, but the maps will be and are confusing for everyone experiencing them for the first time. If they want new players to like the game more, they should tone down or find a way to make that more simple, either making the scout flies better or the map less a pain to read. I did like the ability to fast travel to any of the various mini camps in each camp at any time when not in combat though. That helped navigating these areas faster and less of a headache of exploring, but it was still much slower and longer than the zone system as far as reaching a monster that ran or flew off, Rathalos being the most painful to fight because of the map. Next on the chopping block is settings. The lock-on is awful. But luckily, you don't really need it since it's so much easier and better to just use the analog stick to control the camera. This is 10 times better than the 3DS system way. Despite that though, they still should fix the lock-on. It's just a little too sensitive. The camera gets weird when switching between different body parts of the monster. Like it's too janky. It should smoothly and calmly lock on and switch between parts, but it just seems too hyper and fast. The default option also locks onto smaller monsters, which is the worst thing they could have done, since by default, most people don't fiddle with options right away. So you'd have people locking on to every damn thing even though they got a big monster rushing at them. So I definitely recommend, if and when you do get the game, to immediately go to the options and change things to your liking. These are the options I like to use the best in the beta, which probably will translate to the retail game. I initially hated the radial system they added for this game, but after changing the options to click rather than hover, it made the experience far less annoying, so I don't mind it. And I actually kinda like it since I can quickly use things without having to spam left or right buttons to shuffle through an item like the old ways. If you leave it on hover, you'll most certainly be using items randomly by accident if you move the R thumbstick by accident. which is common since it also controls the camera. This is a complaint for ranged weapons since in order to change ammo, you have to use the left triggers, which brings up the radio system, so you won't be able to control your camera when changing ammo, which sucks. Unless there was an option to make that better that I didn't see, let me know in the comments if there was. One thing I wish they added were weapon icons in the multiplayer window before you start a quest. That would be nice to know what people chose beforehand, rather than maybe having to change in the tent after you start a mission and wasting time. The code thing to join a private party was also really annoying to input, but supposedly it won't be in a retail game since we'll have lobbies and friends and clan members that can just join if they're in your list, so I'm not going to hold that against them. The auto zoom, god, the auto zoom when you spot a new monster is annoying as hell. You can press start to cancel it, but that split second it happens can mess up a combo or get you hit. They need a toggle feature for that, or at least disable it if you're already engaged with another monster. And last but definitely not least are these two things, the timer and cart count. 20 minutes simply wasn't enough time for the beta. In the retail game, it'll most definitely be the standard 50 minutes for most quests, but more often than not, I would run out of time trying to kill the harder monsters, solo or multiplayer, and trying to kill all the monsters of a map is very challenging even for the pro players. I think it should have been 25 minutes, that would have been perfect, especially if they were going to handhold as much as they did with the cart count. So in Monster Hunter, when you do a normal hunt or capture quest, you basically have 3 lives. Once you die 3 times, you fail the quest. In multiplayer, the same goes, but the 3 life count counts for your entire party. Well, in the beta, they gave you freaking 9 lives like a palico. This is an illusion that's not representative of the real game, or at least I hope not. If the beta is supposed to be easier than the real game, according to random people saying they heard that somewhere, which, what does that even mean specifically? Then new players are going to have a hell of a time and lots of frustration once their life count gets reduced by 2/3. So is the gear they gave in the beta too good for the monsters they allow to hunt, thus making it easier? Or is the gear they gave you bad but the monsters were made easier? Because I'm not sure how quite a handful of players will survive if it's the former, and experienced players will most likely lose challenge since they'd forge the best gear they can, which probably wouldn't make monsters harder exactly. The latter can be evened out, the former can't. Having co-opted with a lot of people, tons of people were dying each hunt. Twice I've gotten failed quests in a group due to everyone carting too much, so if the game's somehow going to be harder in the retail version than what people experienced, then I'm not sure if that's a good sign for new players. Of course, elitists will come out and say,
"Good, keep those scrubs off my franchise."
But really, the beta was quite challenging for a lot of people despite the
beta was too easy remarks by some.
While the retail release will surely ease you into the game better than the beta did, with tutorials and whatnot and progressively getting you more accustomed to the game and monsters, what happens when you face Diablos again, but it's harder and you only have 3 chances, you know? It's a valid concern to have if such whispers of beta is dumbed down are true. If that means everything was dumbed down and not just Jagras, Sparoth, or Drotados. But that's it, those were my nitpicks, and while it may sound mostly negative, the game's actually a blast to play that make most of those smallish problems irrelevant, at least for returning players to the franchise. Every time I turned my PS4 off after a stream, an hour later I was like,
I don't need it. I don't need it. I definitely don't need it. I 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 need it!
With 4 people and chatting, I had some hilarious and epic moments when hunting the harder monsters, and continually throughout I'm blown away by the art design and aesthetics. Monsters even sometimes fought each other or appeared in the same area, which led to hectic fights. You can use environment obstacles to damage or trap or stun monsters, allowing you chances to hit them afterward. The satisfaction of struggling against the Diablos or Rathos, then finally getting the kill minutes or even seconds before it was time's up. You just want to stand up and let your soul be heard with the war cry! The beta confirmed that changing and streamlining things like moving while healing, infinite whetstones, smaller life bar and stamina bar taking up the screen, you don't lose stamina when you're not engaged with a monster, no zones and maps, and much more was for the better for the series. It actually feels evolved, and now the past games look completely dated. Once the game comes out, I honestly can't see myself ever going back to the past games. It's that much of a step up in terms of quality of life things, and the gameplay is as good or even better than it's ever been. All we need now is more monsters to fight, and they just announced on Twitter that they do indeed plan to add new monsters to the game that aren't in the base game over time post-release, which is amazing news since usually they never update things for the games besides add quirky quests. So, players getting the game can expect a healthy amount of post-game content to keep them happy, perhaps even years after release, and I'm super excited for what's in store for us. The worst part of the beta is the fact that it's over, and we have to wait till January 26th to play the game again. No. But it's been fun, bros, and thanks for everyone that tuned into my streams of it and co-opted in it. But that's pretty much my take on the beta. Voice some concerns and potential problems, but ultimately the game at its core is too good to let such things drag it down. And also, sliding down slopes in this game is the funnest thing ever. If Capcom doesn't somehow make a minigame out of that where you can race other players down a slope Mario 64 style, I'm a bust. Before I end the video, I'd like to give a shout out to Jalope Redwolf, one of my subscribers who basically bought me Monster Hunter World Deluxe Edition as a donation and support for the channel. So if I had donations up, he basically would have donated $75 worth, which is crazy. That's the kindest act anyone has done for me for this channel, and I'm sure he's tired of hearing it, but I appreciate that amount of support for the channel, man. Really helps me a lot in furthering improving the channel, either providing more content or having better equipment to provide better quality content. So again, thank you, and hell, I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you had fun with the content I'm trying to provide, and there's lots more to come when Monster Hunter World comes out. If you have any questions, whether new player or veteran, I'll be more than glad to respond to them. Also, question of the video, did you enjoy the beta? What were your praises and what were your complaints? Sound off in the comments. I would love to hear your guys' opinion. If you want to support the channel financially, I have set up YouTube sponsorship, which is a green button that should appear whenever I stream. If it doesn't appear on regular YouTube site, it should appear on YouTube gaming version if you watch my videos or streams through that. That's basically like Twitch's subscribe button thing, where you pay $5 in USD a month to support the channel, like a badge that makes you stand out in chat, and eventually special emoticons you can use in chat, which will probably be the emoticons of the waifus I plan to make for the channel in the future. I also plan to have sponsor-only parties in, say, Monster Hunter World, where sponsors will get priority over non-sponsors to fight alongside yours truly in epic battles, as thanks for supporting the channel financially. So yeah, thanks in advance for anyone that does that, it really means a lot. Of course, if you don't have the money, that's fine too. You can still support the channel by pressing that like button, leaving a comment, and of course, subscribe for more Monster Hunter epicness.